Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, retired librarian turned homeschool mom, and in this video we're going to look at something very, very strange. So first, please check out my Charlie and the Chocolate Factory video. That's for the book. Otherwise, this won't make sense because Roald Dahl wrote a sequel. This is Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. This was published in 1971. So this story makes no sense. Forewarning, this makes no sense. And there are some strange issues. So, this is the story. So we leave Charlie with Willy Wonka in the elevator with Grandpa Joe, who I think accidentally called Uncle Joe in my film review. So sorry, this is in fact his grandfather. The three other grandparents still in the bed. Yes, there's a bed in the elevator. And Charlie's parents. And due to an interesting little scuffle, primarily with Grandma Georgina, they miss pressing a specific button and end up in outer space and orbiting the Earth and linking up with a space hotel. No, I'm not joking. That is the first part of the plot of this book. And there's a lot of issues with the crew of the space capsule that is bringing the staff to the space hotel. Arguments with the president, who appears very, very stupid. And arguing with incompetency. So there's that going on. And then they board the Charlie and his family link up with the space hotel. I'm the first to board this space hotel. Then they leave. Then they're attacked by a vicious canid. Not joking, vicious canid. They escape the vicious canid, but then the space capsule is attacked by the vicious canid. And the Great Glass Elevator rescues them. And essentially gets them back into the atmosphere. And then releases them and go back. And they go back to the chocolate factory. No, this makes no sense. Again, there's a bunch of people, including a bed, in a elevator. Moving on. So they get back to the chocolate factory, and Willy Wonka basically thinks that Charlie's grandparents should want to help work at the factory. So he's created a pill that will help them be younger. Which, yes, he experimented on the Oompa Loompas. So again, with the experimenting of slaves or indentured servants, however you call them, because yeah, they're less slavery, more indentured servitude. It's weird. Please check out the previous video on the book, which goes into more of the insanity of the Oompa Loompas. But he experiments on the Oompa Loompas. He turned a 70-year-old one back into a baby. So issues. And then the grandparents get a hold of him, and Grandma Georgina is a very selfish person, and they're kind of insane. They take too many. Leave Grandma Josephine, and Grandma Josephine turns into a toddler. Grandpa George turns into a baby, and Grandma Georgina disappears. So she disappears. She takes too many because it subtracts so many years. So they have to go down deep into the chocolate factory, beyond the chocolate factory, because Willy Wonka did this multiple times. He accidentally gave people a thing that made them cease to exist. So apparently they have to go down, down, down somewhere to where they would be, and there's monsters down there that you cannot see because it's somewhere fog, and basically find the kind of essence or shadow of Grandma Georgina, and then spray a aging drug that's that kind of screws things up, but you have to spray because you can't make them swallow a pill because they're barely in existence. So they do that. She disappears and goes back to being a plus because she's being considered a minus. Yes, that's the terminology. They go back up in this elevator. Well, the second elevator. You have an elevator that goes up, an elevator goes down. This is the elevator that goes down. No, this makes no sense. It really doesn't. This book makes no sense. This is one of those you finish this and it's like, what the heck did I just read situations. So again, they go back up, and Grandma Georgina is like in her 90s. And then they have to calculate, Willy Wonka has to calculate exactly how much to give her to get her back to some sort of normal age. And yes, for some reason, in a matter of seconds, she relives history, including like the Mayflower and all the way up through history and remembering it. No, this makes no sense. This really makes no sense. This book makes no sense. It's very, very weird. And then, of course, they give the aging pills to the other two grandparents, so they become adults again. And then they refuse to leave the bed until, so everybody's back to proper aging now. And then there's a letter from the president saying, oh, you rescued things. Please come to the White House. And that gets the grandparents out of bed. And then they kind of, in the elevator, they're the helicopter that's watching them. They're done with the elevator. And they get new clothing and then go see the president. And I believe that's the end of this book. It makes no sense. I seriously make no sense. I don't know if I should recommend this book. I'm very confused by this book. It's weird. Again, you have the experimenting on the Oompa Loompas. You have a space hotel, which is really, really interesting. And then you have vicious canids and wanting to capture and take people off to eat them and onto a different planet because they're alien creatures. You have a very stupid president arguing with people, being very, very stupid, and arguing back and forth and acting very, very stupid knock-knock jokes. There are issues. This book is just, it's confusing and it's weird. And it's hard to recommend it because it doesn't make much sense. You have it's like you have two separate giant short stories. You have their adventures in outer space and their adventures with aging and experimenting on Oompa Loompas. So, and Grandma Georgina being crazy and nasty. So, yeah, it's weird. There's a little bit of the slavery problems, but the Oompa Loompas aren't entirely messaged too much, besides the fact that Wonky experiments on them, and he does bring them all back. He makes them normal again. But again, he was experimenting on aging and anti-aging drugs. And then he was giving them to Charlie's grandparents, and Charlie's grandmother is a nasty old woman. So, it's a very, very weird book. Now, if you are very interested in the very, very weird book, I'm not sure I would recommend this to young children. I would always say, when it comes to all books, parents read them first. If they like really strange and kind of bizarre books that make very little sense, which some young children do, because they have the imagination to understand this and to release reality more than older people or adults. Which I think is what's known in Narnia. No, I'm not covering them. I'm not covering the Chronicles of Narnia. Too religious, not my channel, not my thing, haven't read them. So, back to this book. It's weird. I can't say enough that I keep saying it's just weird. It's one of those books where as an adult you close it and it's like, what in God's name did I just read? It makes no sense. But again, it's a children's book written in 1971 by a very man who's known for weird, strange things. So, because, yeah, Charlie the Chocolate Factory is a very weird book. James the Giant Peach is a very, very weird book. I recently finished Matilda. We'll cover that. It's weird. But moving on back to this book. So, again, if you like very, very strange and very whimsy, and your kids are kind of into that, and you're looking for something out of the ordinary, and you like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory despite its issues, feel free to read this book aloud. There is nothing against reading it to younger children. You could definitely read it to younger children if you went through the first book and dealt with the slavery issues and the whole shipping people over in a box with air holes in them and then feeding them in cocoa beans. But if you can get through that, you can get through this. This doesn't have those issues besides, the experimenting on the Oompa Loompas, which is covered in the first book. And no, you can't read them separately. This will not make sense if you don't read Charlie the Chocolate Factory. But again, it's strange. Again, it's pretty much all I can say. It's a very, very weird book. There's a reason this has not been made into a film. There is a very, very good reason this is not made into a film because it makes no sense. And there's kind of two short stories that you could literally set them into we're in space and we're dealing with anti-aging. And then it's just kind of connected with the president at the end. That's how you get the grandparents out of bed. So, with the exception of, of course, Grandpa Joe. Which, again, I'm afraid sorry about the references to Uncle Joe. He's definitely the grandfather. But that's really it for this review. This is one of the weirder Roald Dahl books that I have read. It was written in 1971, I think a full almost 10 years after the first book. So maybe Roald Dahl was going insane. He died about 20 years later, but who knows. Let's see, I'm going to briefly check the Wikipedia page. Yes, this was published in Britain in 72, and then again in 73. So let's see. Yes, there's been no adaptations. Apparently there was apparently an unfinished follow-up book called Charlie and the White House, but yeah, he wrote the first chapter, which is on display in the Roald Dahl Museum and Story Center in Great Mesden, which is somewhere, yeah, in Great Britain. So let's see. It might still be. Yep, it looks like it's still in print. At least there was a paperback as of 2018. So I will link that in the description. There's really not much else to say about this book. If you like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, looking for something even stranger, feel free to read this book to your small children or read it yourself. Always recommend parents read this yourself before reading it to your small children, or recommending them read it to them read it themselves. Though there is nothing outward strange in this book that's not in the first book. So if you read the first book, go right ahead. You're not going to find anything besides just how weird this is and how very little sense it makes. So middle schoolers and high schools may enjoy this book. I don't think so. I don't think they're able to separate themselves from reality enough to enjoy just how strange this is. So that is it for this review. It's not very long because the book is not very long and there's not much to say about it. In fact, how long is this book? Is this going to tell me? It actually is very long. It's 202 pages. But again, there's also illustrations with these things, which is pretty much common with most of Roald Dahl's books. There's black and white illustrations. So if you like this review and you like my Charlie and the Chocolate Factory review, like and subscribe. I cover a bunch more Roald Dahl. I do a lot more sane children's books, some interesting film reviews, some educational resources, a little bit of travel stuff, and other homeschooling, non-religious homeschooling. As I mentioned, I'm not covering Narnia ever because I haven't read them and I have no interest to because religion. So not my thing. But, and I have a whole bunch more planned. So like and subscribe. Thank you.